Top of the evening to you. I would say good evening. I guess technically is good morning, basketball fans out there, specifically of the NBA and NBA playoffs. Hashtag a whole new game. Hashtag NBA playoffs. Hashtag NBA. Hashtag where basketball lives. Welcome to the final buzzer with me, DeShaun Tate. You guys know that I typically do this each and every single Monday through Friday. Yes, even on the holidays. Happy holiday to you. Happy Labor Day week and weekend. Monday through Friday, about 15 minutes ish, somewhere right around midnight in most cases of every at the tail end, concluding every NBA playoffs night. And I'm just really happy to have you guys be with me now as we're streaming live right now on Facebook as well as on YouTube, and promoting the Tate's Take podcast, TATES, Tate's Take Hoops on social media. But also be sure to subscribe anywhere that you find your favorite podcasts, as well as be sure to subscribe on YouTube as well. Tate's Take, TATE''STAKE. Now, with all that being said, now that we laid out all the groundwork and all that good stuff, essentially we had some really interesting, I guess, something a little bit different than what we're used to seeing. It hasn't been as much nail-biting basketball or down-to-the-wire basketball as we've seen over the course of the last couple weeks, but something a little bit different here on tonight, where we saw two matchups, one doubleheader between 2 versus 3 seeds. And let's go ahead and jump right into the first one here, as we have the number 3 seeded Boston Celtics taking down the number 2 seeded Toronto Raptors, 111-89. Boston now taking a 3-2 lead in the Eastern Conference semis. And of course, per usual, if you want to join the show, this is how you can do so. Please feel free with any of your questions, comments, opinions, and so forth. That can also be a part of the show as well. A couple things that I want to mention. One of them being, before we start, getting into the teams and so forth. One problem that I have outside of the far too frequent and often replays that we tend to kind of consistently and persistently go into and having to see, and it's just taking the feel and the energy away from the game a little bit too often, where you see the guys, I guess, make a move, go up for a pump fake, wait to draw, wait to get a player, the defender or the opposition off of their feet, and then try to jump into them to draw a foul. I'm somewhat decent and okay with that. But the ultimate problem that I have is knowing when a defender is about to foul as you're coming up the floor or something in that type of scenario, and just throwing the ball up towards the rim. I absolutely hate that play. I know it's legal. I know it's fair. It seems very smart, but I just don't like the feel or the vibe or the energy off of players far too often looking for inadvertent fouls and expecting contact. I just want to throw that out there because that's something I'm just typically not really a big fan of. And then something else. And of course, I'd love for you guys to be a part of the show. You can see the ticker there at the bottom. If you believe that whomever wins this championship, specifically, if you'll put an asterisk on this title because of the fact that they're in the bubble, because of the fact that they're technically, I guess, on a neutral site, because of the fact that, the whole shutdown because of the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement and so forth. So that's just something that I kind of wanted to get a little bit of a feel and an opinion from you guys. Now, as far as, let's go with the winners first. They won, so they deserve to get a little bit of the love. This was clearly going into the game, the 9th consecutive game without Gordon Hayward, who's been out since, I believe, August 17th with an ankle injury. Currently, as an injury update, 5 to 7 days now that he has to quarantine in terms of what's expected. And he's currently in the bubble, so looking to kind of rejoin the team sometime soon. Even more so, I think the simple fact of his sitting out is I think they kind of had to go through and find out what kind of company he's been keeping and what he was doing in the bubble, who was he around, all that type of stuff, whether he did or did not fly in on a commercial plane or a private plane. I know a lot of that has a lot to do with it as well, but they're doing all of this in terms of taking down the defending national champions and one game away from advancing on to the Eastern Conference Championship without a guy that's averaging like 17 points per game for them. Another guy that I think I wouldn't necessarily call him unsung hero, but he is a guy because, yes, they do have some size, talking about the Boston Celtics. However, a guy that I don't think gets nearly as much publicity as maybe he should, maybe a little bit more. I'm not saying he deserves all the credit, but Daniel Tice, being a guy, 15 points tonight, 8 rebounds, 5 for 5 from the field, didn't miss a shot, and 5 for 6 from the free throw line, I think was incredible, especially for somebody like him who is clearly underrated for this team and a very serviceable big as well. Talking about serviceable bigs, let's go over to Robert Williams, who did not specifically have a great game. They typically, even though he doesn't start, he typically brings major, contribution, especially at the beginning of a lot of these games. A guy that provides some energy, some establishment, some youth, some size, the fearlessness that comes along with him, some strength, physical attributes, as well as some athleticism, especially in the first quarter when they use him. And I think that that's a brilliant idea by the head coach and Brad Stevens by asserting him in the lineup when he does, because I think that helps this team a lot. So it's not all Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and a lot of those guys as most people like to think that it is. Also, the suffocating first half defense. In the second half wasn't nearly as good, but or wasn't as good. I won't say it wasn't nearly as good because it was nearly, but it wasn't the exact same of what it was. And in that case, just talking about it, they completely locked down the Toronto Raptors tonight and did a phenomenal job, if I'm just being honest about it. Out-rebounded the Toronto Raptors 41-26 on the defensive end. They had more blocks than Toronto tonight. They had less turnovers than Toronto tonight. So all of these little things are little intricate parts that kind of add up to some of the wins that you see, not just Boston's ability to just play offense, put points on the board and show some defense, but just doing some of the little things to help assist them with adding a number to the left side of the result column for them. Of teams that win game 5, okay, after now taking the 3-2 series lead, after, being tied 2-2, those teams typically win the series 82% of the time. So I think that is certainly notable, something that you might want to think about going into the next game. A lot of people believe this is also a series that's going to go game 7, but that's still yet to be determined. In terms of the bench, I think this is something that's very critical. I always pay very close attention to the bench and, what happens at that time, because, when you start factoring in the starters, some obviously that everybody pays attention to. However, not nearly enough people, I think, pay attention to the bench contribution and how much that actually has to do with when a team wins a game, especially within the playoffs, because that's when you desperately probably need them the most, more than any other time. That is a little weird of a statistic here on tonight, where we saw that Boston had only 2 of Boston's 8 players off the bench scored points, period. Okay, 2 players. One scored 15, I think, and the other scored 2 points. 17 points off the bench for Boston, which they were completely outplayed by Toronto's bench. So clearly it's Toronto's starting lineup that appears to have somewhat of an issue, especially between, the guard play in Kyle Lowry. I think it's a size disadvantage that they're at. And then Pascal just hasn't been really much of a shell of himself. And I tried to tell some people early on, long time ago, that essentially, I don't believe that Pascal Siakam is the player that everybody thinks that he is. I'm not saying that he's a bad player, but I just don't think that he's the player that everybody else thinks that he is. Why? In addition to that, all 7, however, of Toronto's bench players scored. Everybody that came off the bench for Toronto tonight scored the basketball. 44 points total. So 44-17, Boston got outscored, and you would have simply thought that's off the bench. You would have thought that this would have been a game that Toronto would have won, but they didn't. Why? Let's talk about their big 3. First, starting with Jason Tatum, 18 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, but didn't play particularly well, or didn't shoot it particularly well. 33% from the field for him, 1 for 5 from 3-point range. Now, as far as Kemba Walker, 21 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, 1 block. Outstanding. 50+% from the field. Outstanding, but only 1 for 6 from 3. So if my math is correct, that's what? 2 for 11 from 3. If you combine Jason Tatum and Kemba Walker, again, you match that with the bench production or lack thereof from Boston, and you would have thought that this would have been a Boston loss. That just goes to show exactly how lopsided and or outmatched and or I guess Boston just really having Toronto's number, and it kind of have somewhat of a similar feel to this Milwaukee versus Miami series as well. If I'm being quite honest, Jaylen Brown, 27.6 rebounds, 3 steals for him. Now, as far as Toronto goes, there is a player. I talked about unsung heroes. There is a player for the Raptors that I believe is an unsung hero specifically for this team. And it may take some people by surprise. He has played well all series. He has played well last series. He has played well when they came back to the bubble for regular season, games that did count, games that did not count, and the regular season before the bubble, in which all of those counted. And that player is Norman Powell, 16 points for him, 3 assists. And he's the guy that gave the big bulk of the points that Toronto had coming off of the bench. 11 first quarter points is not nearly enough, and that's not a great start. After I saw that, I pretty much figured that this is a game that Boston had in the bag. Toronto, 11 first quarter points. That ties them for the fewest scored points in any quarter in their Toronto Raptors franchise, his playoff history, that is. Excuse me. So that's one of the things that if they are looking to come out and tie up this series with Boston, then they're going to have to find that correction somewhere. But the problem is that it's going to be along with a whole lot of other corrections and solutions to some of the miscues and errors and issues that they seem to clearly be having as well. Fred VanVleet, a guy that we all know and have been watching for quite some time and is looking to get a big time contract for coming up next year. I'm not sure how the CBA is going to have an effect on that necessarily, but he was a huge, intricate part of the World Championship run last year and everything that they've been able to accomplish this year, which is really, really good considering they did not have the MVP or the All-Star MVP from last year, that being Kawhi Leonard. He picks up his 3rd foul early into the 2nd quarter. He remained in the game, which was a little bit of a surprise to me if I'm Nick Nurse, but not nearly as much of a surprise to me if I'm Nick Nurse, because that is where a huge bulk of your offense ultimately comes from. At that point, they were down 15 points in the game and really couldn't afford his offense. Afford his absence. Again, like I said, on the offensive end, he finished with 18-2, 5 assists, 3 steals, but went 2 for 7 shooting from 3. And he's just having a really hard time in this particular series. And I think that it's the size of Boston and the defensive effort to go along with that, and guys that are agile and guys that are mobile, guys like Brad Wanamaker that has been able to switch off between he and Kyle Lowry and play really good defense. He's a guy that had 15 points tonight. That was outstanding for him coming off the bench as well. Why we haven't seen a combination of Chris Boucher and Terrence Davis, 2 guys that came in and have, well, Boucher has the experience, not as much Terrence Davis, but help them get to the point and achieve that the things that they have earlier this season. While they're not playing nearly as much, I'm not exactly sure. And while their numbers did not specifically look outstanding tonight. I still think that there are two players that deserve a little bit more of their playing time because they bring that energy. They bring a good balance of offense and defense between each other. Pascal Siakam, talked about him a little bit earlier. Fifth foul midway through the third quarter just shows that he wasn't having a really great game and wasn't planning to have a really great game, apparently. 10 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists for him. Matt Thomas, a guy that I just kind of took note, hadn't even heard of this guy. There's not too many guys that comes through the college basketball ranks and onto an NBA floor and can fill it up, considering to be their best pure perimeter shooter, which is probably another reason why Toronto is losing this series right now. I took note of him some weeks ago when they returned to the bubble. Wasn't quite sure who he was, but came out and gave some contribution. They say he's the best pure shooter on this team. I kind of feel like that's a problem. 10 points for him tonight, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 for 4 from 3 and 4 for 6 from the field. So good for him, but they need the other guys to step up. I'm not exactly sure why Serge Ibaka was having an issue or kind of a blow up moment, if you will, having words or sharing words with Kyle Lowry earlier tonight. I can kind of understand why, because of Kyle Lowry's 10 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals. That's not enough, especially as their franchise player in the face of their franchise, kind of. But who exactly is Serge Ibaka to be doing all of the complaining? 7 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 blocks for him. That's not nearly enough to get it done. So that game will take place on Wednesday. I want to say that's probably like a 6:30 tip. For right now, Boston leads that series 3-2. And I appreciate everybody for kind of checking in with us tonight, and got a couple different people that have chimed in a little bit with us. Derek Crush Boyd, who typically always does. Appreciate you, Crush, big time. Saying that it's wide open. He's clearly checking in on Facebook. If you can't tell by the avatar down on the left-hand corner of the screen, you see that little blue box with the blue F inside of the white circle, saying that it is wide open. Also mentioning that the competition is competitive and it's all about who is more hungry. And listen to what my boy is saying. He has it down packed. I try my best, bro. Hey, I'm listening to you. You listening to me. You supportive. I'm supportive. And I'm thankful for all the love. You can be much like Derek Crush Boyd as well. And feel free to comment, down at the bottom in any post. We pop it up here right on the screen so that the people know that you have a voice as well. Saying, wow, I had OB as a sleeper. But honestly, I feel that Fred VanVleet is a sleeper, been a sleeper since college. I can kind of see that, but I was wrong about him. Like, coming out of Wichita State, I wasn't quite sure that he was going to be that dude, and I didn't really get a good feel about it. But those Wichita State guys, Ron Baker, Cleanthony Early, some of those guys came into the league and made a little bit of noise for a little bit of reasons. Or for a little while anyway, saying they need unsung heroes. That they do. You can be much like Derek Crush Boyd as well and chime in with us here on the show. Now, as we flip over to the second game doubleheader of the night, we saw the number 2 seeded Los Angeles Clippers take down the number 3 seeded Denver Nuggets 113-107. Now the Clippers lead that series 2-1 in the Western Conference semifinals, and everybody knows that teams that win game 3 and take a 2-1 series lead after being tied 1 apiece win 73% of the time in that particular series. So we'll keep our eyes and our ears open for the next game that'll take place on Wednesday. I think right around like 8:39, somewhere right up in that range as well. We'll have to double check that on the back end. But coming into the game, this was something we were seeing the best version of both teams. We saw, the Clippers look good in game 1. We see Denver look good in game 2. And Denver looked extremely good through the first half and much of the third quarter as well. But clearly it wasn't enough before Denver went cold. We'll get to that here in just a second. But let's start off again with the winners. Let's start off with the Los Angeles Clippers, who clearly seem to be outsmarted from an IQ standpoint. They were out-hustled, getting beat to loose balls and second chance points and getting destroyed in paint points. And Denver just really appeared to be the more alive team, the more energetic team, the hungrier team throughout that course of the first 12, 24, I guess, probably 28 to 30 minutes, I would say, to be like for sure. They've got some things they got to get figured out. They've got far too much talent on that team and offensive firepower and scoring punch to go as cold as they did. And I think a big, huge piece of that was not having Michael Porter Jr. in the lineup when they really needed him the most. And I know that he doesn't have the experience that some of the other guys have, but he's certainly a ball player. And he's, one thing that I noticed was the ability to have Gary Harris back. Having Gary Harris back in the lineup, I think, has shown to be a huge benefit on both sides of the ball for this team, from a shooting standpoint, from a lockdown perimeter defensive standpoint. That's one of the reasons behind why they struggled so much with the Utah Jazz, because they did not have him between he and Will Barton, who is now not being ruled out on a return. It is more likely of a return for the next series. Of course, he has to go through the whole quarantine thing and all that kind of stuff. But in the event that they advance on to likely what looks like now is going to be probably playing the Lakers, but Houston's still in, and I'm still rolling with the Lakers on that one in a close one. I think 6 games I'm gonna go with, but this is one of those things where they needed him for perimeter defensive purposes between him and Gary Harris. Now they have Gary Harris back, and he provides a little bit more of a scoring punch. He's still trying to get his legs up under him a little bit, but they do need Will Barton back to try to upend some of the Clippers' offensive firepower, because while so many people give the credit to Kawhi Leonard and so many people give the credit to who they call playoff P, I guess. Both of those guys are very good offensive players, but they're also very good defensive players as well. And I think it's just too much of a load for Gary Harris to be taking on the perimeter side, which Denver is not really known for, much like the Lakers on their defensive side, missing Avery Bradley and now just kind of getting Rajon Rondo back. Similar situation to what Gary Harris is kind of going through. With the Clippers also is something I see, Kawhi Leonard he's in a really peculiar situation. Like, we saw the way that he can get down in stifling defensive situations. He got the block on Jamal Murray where, he blocked it with one finger, which I can't even imagine. That's extremely, extremely tough to do. That's one of the best blocks I think I've ever seen in my life, sitting there watching it. And their 30 fast break points, 19 of them in the second half, is something that I feel like kind of sealed the deal for this team. It didn't help the fact that, this is also a game to be remembered for Denver, because they clearly took their foot off of the gas. This is one that could haunt them down the road. They were in control most of the game until they went cold and went 17 for 22 and 1 for 9 from 3. Nikola Jokic, who is an absolute animal, was active tonight, came into the game with a wrist injury. And I just kind of felt like he must take advantage of the Zubac matchup. That's kind of more of a mismatch for him. And his vision and his passing ability is so off the charts. I know he's out there doing everything he can. One of the most patient players in the league to go along with a couple others, most notably probably James Harden when you start thinking about patience. Luka Doncic also in that same conversation. But Denver, we really needed to see more of Michael Porter Jr. I think, I got to go back and look at exactly his stat line. I want to say he was somewhere around like 18 and 10 rebounds or somewhere up in that range. A little bit too much finesse on the release on his jump shooting sometimes, but nonetheless, I think that he is a guy that needs to move into that starting lineup relatively sooner than later. However, the issue with that is they need that offensive firepower coming off of the bench. They need somebody that can shoot the ball. A nasty, nasty dunk over 6th Man of the Year award winner Montrezl Harrell. But I still believe that he is a guy that ultimately it's not a great fit for him. I don't think Denver's a great fit. He needs to move around and go somewhere else and be in another market. But as of right now, people are saying he's better on that second unit coming off the bench to be able to bring some offense. And while that's true, I'm not sure that that's the role that he needs to play. I think you want a more experienced player coming off the bench because you have something to fall back on and not so much relying on a rookie or a second-year player in that type of situation. And Denver needed to match the physical intensity from the Clippers tonight, and that they did, but they went cold, and that was just something that they really couldn't afford to do. So that game is now in the books. The Clippers take a 2-1 series lead. The Boston Celtics are on, or the Clippers. The Raptors are on the brink of elimination themselves. I'm really thinking about taking for tomorrow's game. Let me see who we got. We got Milwaukee. A little bit of a Tate's Take prediction or projection. I think I'm gonna go with. I need to see if Giannis is going to play. But if Giannis plays, I think I'm going to go with Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks to take down the Miami Heat and turn into an interesting series all over again. And then Lakers and Houston. That's going to be a tough one. Which way do I want to go on that one? Lakers or Houston? Because that one I think is just going to be a really good game as well. You know what? I'll tell you what I'll do. You want to find out the answer? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take some more time to think about that one. We are going to get back on wax, but I am going to answer it. But make sure that you go and follow on social media. By game time tomorrow, I will be sure to have an answer for you on who I'm going to take on that Lakers and Houston Rockets. I want to do a little bit more of my researching on that one. At Tate's Take Hoops is where you can follow me on all social media platforms. TATESTAKEHOOPS. Hashtag where basketball lives. Again, make sure that you follow the podcast. We have some really awesome guests coming up. We've had some really awesome guests in the past. We've had the Jay Billis. We've had the Michael DeCourcy. We have had Scoop Jackson. We've had Larry Johnson. I mean, we've had Sekou Smith, Arthur Trish. I mean, we have had a plethora of really, really good guests on this show recently, and there's just more and more and more really good guests to come, and they're going to be sharing some really interesting stories along with some NBA playoff predictions and projections. So remember, hashtag Black Lives Matter. NBA playoffs, this is the final buzzer with DeShaun Tate, Monday through Friday, about 15 minutes or so after the final playoff game concludes. So be sure to tell a friend, tell a family member, tell an enemy, tell your mama, tell your grandmama to subscribe to the best, the most entertaining, the most informational, and the most educational podcast on the planet in the in basketball content that's just flowing through the roof. And I'm here to do this thing with you guys for over the course of the next 4 days, 96 hours or so. I think that sounds just about right. So appreciate everybody for checking in. Remember to go and subscribe also on the YouTube page, Tate's Take. Appreciate everybody for checking us out. And I'll see you guys somewhere within the next 23 or 24 hours at Tate's Take Hoops, TATESTAKEHOOPS, where basketball lives. Appreciate you.